Okay, so we'll start with so some basics about Bhagavad Gita. So where was it spoken? It's spoken more than 5,000 years ago. It's spoken by Krishna to Arjuna. I think most of you know this. And this is, however, this is the first time it was spoken. So it's spoken previously as well. This knowledge was given by to Sangha millions of years back. However, that knowledge got lost, and then they had to restart that knowledge. And Gita that current has been spoken by now years back. Where is this? So it's part of this one of our classes. Uh, Basically historical. So iti means so, Vyasa means was. Vyasa is Mahabharata and Ramayana are historical references. That's where it's about 60 slokas and appears in what is called Parva section of Mahabharata. So it goes from chapter to all the chapter of in Mahabharata. That's exactly where this appears. And the question often asked is who wrote this? So we say Ved Vyasa wrote it, and so Veda means knowledge and Vyasa means compiler. So it's, I'm not sure if it's one person or many persons, but Veda is knowledge and Vyasa is compiler. So it says the compiler of the Vedas wrote this. And besides Gita, this person also wrote Vedas, obviously, and 18 Upanishads and Vedanta Sutras as well. Okay, so what is the importance of Bhagavad Gita? So it is essentially the most read of all Hindu scriptures. It is supposed to contain the most important knowledge that is there in the Hindu scriptures. So that's the brief background about Gita. Any questions on that? Okay, so I'll proceed. So now the name Bhagavad Gita, let's break it down. Let's try and understand what does Bhagavad Gita mean. So it has actually basically three words: Bhaga, Vad, and Gita. So Gita, probably you know, Gita is song. It's the same in Hindi as well, Geet or Gita. So it's song. Vad means to speak, right? So we have in Hindi, we debating in Hindi is called Vaad Vivad, which is basically to speak and counter speak on those topics. And Bhag or Bhaga is essentially it means fortune. So in Hindi we have this word Bhagya. So it's derived from Bhaga, which is essentially fortune or opulence. Even the word Bhagwan actually means somebody who has all the opulences, somebody who has all the fortunes. So for example, there is a precise definition of Bhagwan in Vishnu Parva, and it says Bhagwan is somebody who has got six opulences. So what are these six opulences? These are beauty, strength, fame, renunciation, knowledge, and wealth. So anybody who possesses all these six, and not just possesses, but possesses all these in full, is Bhagwan. So if you do not possess all this in full, then you're not Bhagwan. So you need to possess all these in full. So why is this important? So let's look at people around us. Even if we have one of these six qualities and not even in full, even partially, the people who are slightly above the average in terms of beauty, they become immensely attractive to rest of us, right? Example, Mona Lisa. Strength. If you have more strength than an average person, you become attractive. People are attracted towards you. If you're slightly more famous than others, you become attractive. There is a request to mute other participants. I'll try to mute everybody else, or maybe you guys can put it on mute. Sorry, I'm not familiar with how to put everybody on mute, so maybe you guys can help me by putting yourself on mute if you're not speaking. Okay, so we continue. Similarly, fame. So if you are more famous than others, then you are attractive. Shah Rukh Khan is the most famous person on the planet. 3 billion people know him, and he becomes attractive for that reason. Renunciation. So why is renunciation important, and why is renunciation uh, so appealing? So if you look at sadhus, or if you look at people like Buddha, so their attractiveness comes from the fact that they have renounced things. They have renounced the worldly pleasures. They have renounced the world, and that makes them attractive. Knowledge, obviously we know this, right? So people like Einstein, Newton, they become attractive because they are imparting knowledge. They are reservoirs of knowledge, so they have become attractive to us. Wealth, people like Bill Gates, so these guys become attractive because they have more wealth than others. So now each one of the people that I mentioned are attractive in their own right because they possess uh, one of these 6 opulences, and they do not possess this in full. They probably possess this in partially, and despite having only partial of this, they are still attractive to us, right? So imagine if somebody has all this in full, how attractive would that be? That is the precise definition of Bhagwan, somebody who has all these 6 opulences and has this in full. So if you do not have all this in full, then you are not Bhagwan. So this Gita essentially is the song of God. That's what the literal translation is. So song of Bhagavan. Now it might seem that there is a bit of a contradiction here, because how can you have all the wealth in the world and still be renounced? So the idea is that you have all the wealth in the world, but you're not attached to it. So you don't care. It's all around you, but you don't care. So that's when you reach that state of renunciation, where the wealth is around you, but you are not bound by that wealth. You're not bound by that opulence. It's just there. It's just there for you, but you are not attached to it. Yeah, any other feat, fame, strength, wealth, but wealth is something which we can most associate with most. We understand that it's not easy to give up your money. So the idea is that you have all the money in the world, you have all the wealth in the world, still you're not attached to it. And we do valuations for companies, we do valuations for individuals. You can also do valuation for this entire world, right? The entire earth. Then you may come with some trillion or mega trillion number. Imagine what is the valuation of the whole solar system. You have if you were to mine Jupiter, if you were to mine Saturn, what would be the valuation of that? And then imagine what's the valuation of entire Milky Way, and then so on and so forth, the entire universe. So there is somebody who has all this around, and yet is not attached to that. So that's the idea. So I'll move on now. So that's the background of what Bhagavad Gita is, what it means. So this is precisely the definition of Bhagavad Gita literally. Okay. So now the next slide is about understanding Gita, and why is it important to understand Gita from a so-called guru, or somebody who has understood themselves. And the question often is that why can't I understand it by reading myself? Like people read books, right? Why can't you read Gita like any other book and understand it? You can read Gita. It will probably give you some knowledge. It will probably give you some meaning to why it was written, why it was spoken, what it talks about. But it may not be the complete knowledge, and more importantly, it may be inaccurate knowledge as well. Now, even Bhagavad Gita itself talks about this. So there is this verse 4.11. So when it's written BG 4.11, it means Bhagavad Gita. 4 is the 4th chapter, and 11 is the shloka. So the 11th shloka in the 4th chapter. What it says is that Ye yatha mam prapayadyante Tams tatheva bhajme aham. So what it means is that I approach you. So Bhagavad Gita is a very powerful scripture. The way you approach it, the same way it approaches you. So if you have your So if you have your preconceived notions, it will appear to you that it is it is confirming your preconceived notions. And I'll show you a video on this, and probably it will become clearer. I'm just trying this because I didn't go through with the hyperlinks. I'll try to copy and paste this. I hope it works, and let's see. Okay, there we go. I'm not sure why it's so slow today. So essentially what that says, for those of you who don't understand Hindi, it says nobody kills and nobody dies. I'm not saying this, Gita says this. And then this guy takes that as an excuse to kill people around. Now, that is what I meant, that the scripture is so powerful that the way you approach it, it will approach you in the same way. So if you have some preconceived beliefs, it will appear as if the scripture is confirming your beliefs. That's why it's important to study it from somebody who has understood it, in the right spirit of the way, right spirit of the Gita, for the reason it was spoken. Otherwise, you are subject to your own speculation.
Mute பண்ணு கிருஷ்ணா இருக்கிற mute பண்ணு இந்த பாரு மெசேஜ் பாரு
Can I request everybody to mute if you're not present? Okay. Then
எப்படி பண்ண கேளுங்க இத பேசக்கூடாது இருக்கா
another very important verse is 7.3. Now in this verse it says that Manushyanam Sahasreyu Yasam Api Siddhanam Kasid Yatati Siddhaye Kasin Mam Vedi Tatavata. So what it means is that Sahasra means 1,000. So out of 1,000 men who may endeavor for perfection, one of those will achieve perfection and hardly one will know me in truth. So what it means is that, see, a lot of people don't even read Gita or don't even want to know about the bigger truth, right? Not just Gita, about in any way. So there are very few people who would want to know about this. Out of those thousands that may want to know, one may strive for perfection, and I will come to what perfection means. And out of those who strive for perfection, one may probably achieve perfection, and even that person may not know me in truth. So what does it mean? So when it says perfection, it means perfect knowledge of how this whole thing operates, how the universe operates, how it was created, what are the laws and the methods that govern the whole universe, right? So that's the perfection that we're talking about, perfection of knowledge, trying to understand how the whole thing operates. So thousands of people may want to know that. Few may endeavor to try to make efforts to know in that direction. Out of those few who try to endeavor to know that, very few will actually reach some sort of perfection. And even among those people who reach some sort of perfection, nobody can actually understand the truth in entirety. So that's what it is. So you may strive to know, but there is only as much you can know, and there probably very few people will actually understand in full. Now finally, in Gita, there are only 4 people who speak in Gita. So there is Sanjaya, that's where Gita starts. Gita starts saying that Sanjaya says something. And then there is Dhritarashtra, who is the blind father of Kauravas. So they are having a dialogue within themselves. And it starts with a question. The question which Dhritarashtra asked to Sanjaya is, now that the 2 armies are standing next to each other, what is most likely the outcome of the war going to be? So that's the question. That's the question that begins Gita. The genesis of Gita is an inquiry, and rest of Gita is actually Sanjaya, who had divine vision. He could see the battlefield, a bit like nowadays we have CCTV cameras where you can see far away. So imagine that Sanjaya had the CCTV vision, whereby he could see what was happening far away, and he then narrated that to Dhritarashtra, and he told Dhritarashtra what was happening in the battlefield. So before this battle started, essentially Mahabharata is a battle between a family, an extended family. It's a battle of 2 cousins, right? So in this battle, there are armies which are lined up against each other. And just as they're about to fight, Arjuna, who is the most prolific warrior on the Pandavas side, refuses to fight. And when he refuses to fight, there's a dialogue that goes on between his friend, Krishna, and himself. And Gita is essentially that dialogue. So Sanjaya is narrating that dialogue back to Dhritarashtra, the dialogue that goes between these 2. And the question that was asked is, essentially, Dhritarashtra is the father of Kauravas, and his question, naturally from a father's point of view, is who is going to win the war? So that's the question that he asks Sanjaya, and the entire Gita is a reply to that question. So it's 700 shlokas. 700 shlokas is actually not a lot of verses. It's actually hardly 2 hours of conversation that these guys may have had. And a lot has been said about Gita, a lot has been spoken about Gita, but essentially it's just 2 hours of conversation. So if you understand Sanskrit, and if you understand Sanskrit at the level of Arjuna, I mean, can you imagine? Arjuna was the most proficient warrior, the most learned, one of the most learned person at his time. Uh, it's a bit like one of the great scientists in our time. So if you want to understand, let's say, quantum physics, you need to first understand the basics of quantum physics at that level. So Arjuna understood Shastras, he understood Dharma, he understood Karma, he understood a lot of these topics in great detail. So somebody like that, when they are trying to interpret what is being said to them, obviously their understanding will be much higher than what you and I can understand. And hence, when we say that this dialogue was spoken to between two people, it's just 2 hours of conversation, and it's just 700 shlokas, which is basically 1400 lines. Why can't I read it and understand myself? You can't read it and understand yourself because you need to understand, you need to be at that right level. It's like, you know, saying that why can't I open an encyclopedia and understand myself, and you don't understand ABCD? So first you need to understand ABCD, then you need to understand words, then you need to understand how to make sentences, and only then you can probably understand some parts of encyclopedia, because there would always be some words, some terms that you don't understand the meaning of. That's why you need somebody to explain it to you. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to explain what I understood from somebody else. Now, I may be right, I may be wrong, but I'm trying to explain it to the best of my abilities in the spirit that it was given to me. So I'll move on. So this is a brief background about Gita, when it was spoken, who spoke it, how you can understand it, what it takes to understand it. Okay, so I'll move on to the next slide now. So as I was mentioning, there are 5 fundamental topics that Bhagavad Gita talks about: Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, and Karma. Now, the issue is that when we talk about what's the difference between science and so-called spiritual knowledge. Now, if you look at science, we talk a lot about material nature, Prakriti, which is the universe around us. We really talk lots and lots about it. In fact, most of the science is concentrated around that Prakriti, around how does the nature operate. And then we have some understanding of Kala, which is time, and this understanding came only recently, right? Until recently, we didn't know that space and time is actually the same thing. So it's not even more than 100 years that that Einstein in 1905 came up with this theory of relativity, and we understood that time is actually one of the dimensions. So that's a very recent thing. And karma, we know to a certain degree that there are consequences for every action we do, but we don't know how exactly it operates, right? So the last 3, the modern science or the modern way of thinking, we have some understanding. First 2 we don't even talk about, right? Because we don't have any understanding of this. So again, people ask me, can you prove or disprove it? And we'll go through that in great detail later. Maybe you cannot prove or disprove it in the way you prove hypothesis in science. But if you look at Gita, and if you go through it sequentially, and I look at it as a book of frameworks and laws. So in MBA we have frameworks, and in science we have laws. So when you look at it, you will see that it's quite logical, the way they classify things, the way they explain things. So some things you can understand from your logic. So when you understand, let's say there are 100 concepts it talks about, and 30 of them or 70 of them you understand through your logic. And then there are 30 that you probably don't understand, but then somewhat you intuitively understand, or you probably have to then have this conviction that because 70% of it is true, and that is true based on my own understanding, maybe the remaining is also true. Now, you probably cannot set up an experiment to verify these things, but then you don't have much choice there. That's you really have to take it on its face value. And I will come to it in the next slide, what it means by taking things at face value. Now, material nature or the Prakriti, as I said, a lot is said about this, and this itself comprises 5 gross elements and 3 subtle elements. So what are those 5 gross elements? So we know this. We talk about air, ether, earth, space,
fire, right? So those are the 5 elements. And although you may say that we have 108 or whatever elements we have in the periodic table, so if you look at it carefully, all those 8 elements are actually part of those 1 element as per this classification, which is Earth. So in terms of chemistry, you classify it slightly differently. But if you think of it holistically, the way it's classified in Vedas in those 5 gross elements is also not wrong, because if you assume those to be the fundamental constituents, you still are able to create everything around you, because the definition of element is elementary things from which you can create everything around. So in that sense, those 5 gross elements are correct. And then there are 3 subtle elements. What are these 3 subtle elements? These 3 subtle elements are mind, intelligence, and false ego. Each of them have very precise definition and very precise understanding. We'll go through it in subsequent discussions. So when we say mind and intelligence, now in English we use this interchangeably, right? But they are actually different in Sanskrit. One is mana and one is buddhi. So again, we'll go through this in great detail in future, and what is the difference between these. Then there are 3 gunas, and you might have heard about this. It's sattva, rajas, and tamas. So these gunas are basically modes. These are the modes in which the jiva operates. So basically, what Bhagavad Gita talks about is, if I were to combine all these 5 concepts that are there, Ishvara, Jiva, Prakriti, Kala, and Karma. So Bhagavad Gita talks about how Jiva is the living entity or the soul, interacts with Prakriti, which is the material nature around, in Kala, in time, and the consequence of that interaction is governed by the laws of karma. So I'll just repeat what I said. So Gita actually talks about how Jiva is soul, interacts with Prakriti, which is the material nature, in Kala, which is time, and the consequences of these interactions are governed by the laws of karma. That's what Gita is. And it talks about these laws, these principles in great detail. So I'll move on to the next slide. So as I was saying, that there is 2 ways of getting knowledge. One is inductive, one is deductive. So inductive is when you go bottom up, deductive is when you go top down. And then linked to that is there are 3 ways to prove. So what are the 3 ways to prove? So one is called pratyaksh praman, the other is called anuman praman, the last one is called shabd praman. So what's the difference? So pratyaksh means something that you can see for sure. Then there is anuman praman, which is basically guessing or estimating. And then lastly, there is Shabd Pramar, which is basically axioms. So I'll give you an example. So Pratyaksh Pramar is like, we can't see without naked eyes the rings on Saturn, but using telescopes and all we can see. So that's something which you're seeing or observing. So that's Pratyaksh. Pratyaksh means something that you can observe. Then Anuman Pramar is something that you actually estimate. So let's say there is a galaxy far, far away, or there is a solar system far, far away. So from there, we cannot see planets. We can probably only see the star of that solar system. Now, once in a while, the light which is coming from that planet blips, and these light blips at regular intervals. So what you can assume is that probably there is a planet which passes through, and that's why the light coming blips. It's because that planet eclipses the light which is coming from that star. So now you can't actually see that planet, but then you can just estimate that maybe there is a planet. So that is Anuman Pramar. Lastly, there is Shabd Pramar. So it's like axioms, like Euclidean geometry. When you say that a straight line can always pass through 2 points. Now, you can't prove or disprove it. It's true in its own right. So similarly, in Gita, you will have all these 3 kind of examples where something will be Pratyaksh Pramar, which you can obviously see. And then there will be something which is more estimate, and then a lot of it would be Shabda Pramar, which you have to believe it on face value. So so that's the background of how we get knowledge and what are the 3 ways to prove it. Now, modern science has excessive dependence on Pratyaksh Pramar and Anuman Pramar, and they don't even believe in Shabda Pramar. So modern science, it's out of the purview of modern science. They don't believe things as given, and that's the framework in which modern science operates. So now the other thing is when people say seeing is believing. So if you see this slide, you have, are these lines straight or are they curved? And do you see a vase or do you see two people? Or which of these two dots is bigger? Now, this is the problem with perception. When you try to understand the universe with your perceptions are not perfect. And that's why probably you need something else to understand the universe. Similarly, hearing, we can't hear ultrasound, we can't see infrared. There are a lot of limitations with what we can see and observe. Yesterday I saw this, somebody sent this to me on WhatsApp. So the slide, the picture on the right, if you play that video, you will hear either Yanni or Laurel. So depending on what kind of ears you have, whether your ears are younger or older. And similarly, this ad that they had in Spain, only kids can see that the guy has bruises. Adults don't see it because of the way in which it's projected. So what I'm trying to say here is that our perceptions are not perfect. I would have gone through this on YouTube, but because we've lost time, I'll just leave it. Okay, then in the process of acquiring knowledge, the problem is that our senses, if we try to acquire knowledge with our senses are not perfect, they're imperfect, as I showed in the previous two slides, they're imperfect. We have tendency to be illusioned, which I showed in the previous slide. We have tendency to be illusioned. Then we also commit mistakes like this, to R is to human, and scientists are not an exception to that. And finally, we have a tendency to cheat. We have a tendency to cheat both knowingly and unknowingly, because we are we believe in the truth that we want to believe, right? So if you're primed to believe in something, you will believe in that, and that's what it means why we have a tendency to cheat ourselves and to cheat others, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. And because of all these four reasons, it's sometimes hard to actually understand the world around us using our perceptions. And also there is something called absolute truth and relative truth. For example, the Newton's gravity versus Einstein's gravity. So which one of them is true? Now, Newton's gravity explains the universe to a great detail, but it still doesn't explain the path of Mercury around the sun. And for that, you need Einstein's gravity. Even Einstein's gravity fails inside a black hole. So all these are truth, but these are relative truth. They apply in a limited conditions, and you need something which is absolute truth. So what's absolute truth? Absolute truth is something that doesn't change with time and is always true. So Gita, in some sense, is a quest for that absolute truth, and we're trying to find answers for that absolute truth. And in the bottom of the slide, I put a link to an observatory that was there in Australia, and these guys were getting microwave signals from distant universe, or so is what they believed. And papers were written on this, that, oh, we are getting messages from the outside world, we are not alone, there are other intelligent beings. And finally, it was figured out that microwave radiation was actually coming from a microwave oven in the lab itself. So that's why I'm saying that there is a tendency, we can be mistaken. Our senses are not perfect. Our ways of deducing the truth is not perfect. Similarly, the truth is relative. This picture explains it perfectly. So depending on what part of the truth you're looking at, truth may be relative. It may be, I mean, each one of them is right, but they're all wrong because they don't give the full picture. So to get the full picture, you need to see something which is more authoritative, something which goes beyond what science can explain, probably. And also, one of my most favorite slides, there is a limit to what you can know. So we can only see 46 billion light years across, and we can't see beyond that, even if we had the most powerful telescopes. The reason is that galaxies from there are falling apart faster than the speed of light, and nothing in the universe travels faster than the speed of light. So no information from outside of that can ever come to us. So we see a very, 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 very small part of the universe. It's a very, very small part of the universe that we can actually even ever see. And out of that, what we can see, with current technology, we see even a smaller part of it. We only see 14.5 billion light years across. So we don't even see the entire universe. So what point is it to speculate if the universe is complete and we know everything about the universe? Then Shak Pramar is basically believing what you hear, or assuming that what you're listening is coming from a bona fide source. So whatever is being said is true, and you don't have to believe it on face value. If you go logically, you will see that yes, Gita is actually a set of frameworks and laws, and when we look at them in totality, it kind of makes sense. So as I said, Vedic truth are axiomatic. They're Shak Pramar. You can't actually prove it in the way you prove scientific knowledge. Not everything can be proved in that way. Some things you have to believe on intuition. So that's essentially what it is. So I look at Bhagavad Gita as a manual for the universe. It makes sense of the universe around. It makes sense of the people around. It tells you how to behave. It tells you the consequences of your action. Look at coronavirus, right? People would say that human beings can eat whatever they want. Yes, you can eat whatever you want, but remember there will be consequences, right? You can destroy the planet to whatever degree you want, but there will be consequences. So it's always important to know about the consequences. So Bhagavad Gita actually tells you about the consequences of your actions. So it's in that spirit. If you read Gita, you will see how it makes sense and how it's going to make your interactions with people around you better. So that's all I had to speak about. I've rushed through the last few slides. We still have around 15 minutes, so I can take questions. If you have questions, please let me know. I will be happy to take questions. Do you have any questions?
Hi everyone, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so do you have any question? We'd be more than happy to take questions.
Not from my side.
Not from your side. Raji, do you have any question?
Oh, suggestions or comments?
Any comments, any suggestion, anything that you see that we need to discuss in more detail, something that was not clear, something that we missed out?
Or maybe you can add something.
Like Prakriti and all.
So, sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
No, that the Prakriti, that 5 elements and 3 elements you explained in the starting slides.
So I can explain you more about it. So see, the 5 gross elements are the elements that we know from modern science, right? So this is essentially it talks about Earth. So Earth includes all those 108 elements. Then there is Agni. Agni is fire. So for example, okay, you go ahead.
So we have Earth, which is considered like the most the hardest and the most basic one. Then after that we have water, and after that we have air, and essentially we do have those how many Mendeleev's table?
Mendeleev's 108 or whatever.
108 elements. So they can be metals which are in Earth. They can be some substances which are in the water form or gas shape. Then after that we have ether, and then we also have fire, and then we have air, and then we have ether. Ether is the most subtle of all gross elements. And then after that we cannot see ether, we cannot see the void, but we can only perceive it when the sound goes through it. Sound goes through it. Light or sound goes. Sound doesn't go through it. Light goes through that. And after that, literally our bare ability of our naked senses stops, and after that we don't perceive anything else. So from there, there starts the mind. We can only perceive the mind in a way we see things, right? So we have senses, and then from our senses we receive, we have the receptors, and then it goes into our mind. We know that we are touching something, we know that we hear something. Above the mind, mind is literally like connected to the senses. Above the mind there is intelligence. So the good like example to see the difference between mind and intelligence will be like, let's say, okay, I see the ice cream, right? I want it. So my mind says, okay, let's go and get that ice cream, but it's full of sugar. And if somebody supposedly have diabetes, and then if he eats that ice cream, he'll have problems. So the intelligence tells you, hey, don't do that. Yeah?
Yeah, so mind is basically, mind is like a processing unit. It just responds to a stimuli. So mind doesn't have the processing power. So if you give something sweet to somebody who has diabetes, the mind will tell, eat it, eat it, eat it. It's the intelligence that tells you don't eat it, you will fall sick. So intelligence is something that is used to control the mind. That's why you have a lot of these mind control sessions that people talk about, right? And lastly, there is this false ego. So false ego is aham. Aham is basically, aham in Sanskrit means me. So what false ego essentially is when you believe that you are actually this body, and this body is all that you are, whereas that is not true. You are more than your body. So false ego is a very subtle concept. It's not easy to understand, but essentially when we talk about three subtle elements, it's the mind, it's the intelligence, and then even subtle is the false ego. The false ego, or the concept of aham. Aham means who am I, right? So that aham is even more subtle. It is when you start believing that this body is all that you are.
And also, we develop the false ego when we get into touch with the material nature, prakriti, and then we think that this body is all we are, and then that we possess something. We are owners of something. But like a good example for this, like everybody comes in this world with nothing, and everybody leaves this world with nothing. So actually, everything which we operate with in this world, in the prakriti, in the material nature, is because of the false ego. It is necessary to some extent so that we are in touch with this, and then we can operate and we can do some actions. But if we forget that we are not the only this body, then there's that's the problem. That's why understanding that there is something else about the false ego is important, and I think that's why the Gita also talks about
yeah
this.
And that something else is actually soul. That's the jiva part of it, right? So beyond these material nature, which is 3 gross element, 5 gross element and 3 subtle elements, you have this soul. So again, I can't prove or disprove to you that there is a soul, but that's what Gita says, and this session is all about what's written in Gita, right? So Gita talks about soul. So that's what I'm telling you, and that's the way in which Gita classifies the universe.
Well, why the way Gita presents it is good, because it doesn't cut any part of the whole picture. Like it says that gross elements are important. Then they go from the like gross and slightly more subtle, and then it goes all the way to the top to such subtle elements which we can't even perceive with our senses. And that is what Rahul said in some previous explanations, that our senses are imperfect and that we can make mistakes. So we might not be able to see it with our own eyes. We can perceive it through any other senses, or we might not. But knowing about it is important. That's why Gita. That's why the beauty and the beauty of the structure of the Gita in giving the whole picture of how things operate.
Yeah, so essentially when she says it doesn't negate any of the modern science, right? It doesn't say, okay, so when we go from earth, which is the most gross, right? It's, you can touch, you can feel it. Then there is water, which is the liquid stage. Then you go to air, which is more in rarefied state. Then from there you go to Agni, which is even more subtle, and then ether, which is even more subtle. And then there is more subtle concepts of mind which you can't even touch, right? Or intelligence which you can't touch, false ego which you can't touch, then there is soul. So it includes everything that the modern science talks about, but then it goes beyond. That's why when I say relative truth and absolute truth, so it is truth in its entirety. Does that help you, Rajiv?
Yeah, it really helps.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, from my side, okay, thanks.
Okay, so the thing is that in this session, I'm sorry for the interruption that we had with technology, but essentially we tried to lay the background of what Gita is when we talked about where it's spoken, Bhishma Parva, chapter 25 to 42. Then we came about when it was spoken, to whom it was spoken, how can you learn it, what are the concepts it talks about, in the 5 concepts that are in your slides now. Who is Bhagwan? What is the properties of Bhagwan? Why can't you understand this through your perceptions, through your senses? Our senses are imperfect. So these are the things that we talked about. So in the next session, we will we'll talk about soul or the jiva. I think that's the next session, and we'll talk about what soul is. And soul is one of the fundamental concepts of Gita. So there are some fundamental concept of Gita which you have to kind of take it as given, like the concept of karma, the concept of jiva. So unless you kind of take them as given, you cannot build on the other concepts of Gita. So again, I keep repeating this. It's not possible to prove or disprove that there is soul or there is karma, but in a limited sense, you do see you can prove it, but not in entirety. And I'll tell you why that's not possible when we go through these sessions. So we will be building on these concepts. The beauty is, whether you believe it or not, it helps you refine yourself. It helps you refine your dealings with people around you, dealing with the nature around you. And I think that's what we are trying to take away here. Whether you absolutely believe that God spoke this or not, that's not important. Even if you look at it from a management perspective, it tells you how to manage yourself, how to manage the world around you better. So that's the crux of it. So with that, I will conclude. If there are no more questions, then we will meet in the next session, and hopefully that session will not have so many technical glitches. We'll try to see if we can use an alternative to Zoom, or we will test if Zoom itself works. Thank you so much for your time. I saw somebody just joined. Somebody, Karma, just joined. Do you have any questions, Karma? We have gone through the session, and I think you just joined. So if you have anything, we're happy to answer or take questions. Okay, so I think we don't have any other questions. So we'll close this session.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.